If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. We have battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content. Thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by. Time for another Hubtown Hammer Custom Custodes list. This is a Shield Host list that I have been testing over the past 2 or 3 weeks. Hopefully it will be an upcoming battle report sooner than later. And I did write this list before the March balance update. I just didn't have the time to get it out. Luckily, it is a great way to show that we are still in a good place and the nerfs really weren't that bad. Except to the Solar Spearhead, they did take the brunt of the nerfs. This is a Shield Host list with no Caladius Grav-tanks, just pure board control and melee aggression in this list. I will show a list variation for those who want some tanks though. And I do have my old list and my new list here, just showing you the changes that I've made from the balance update. So let's take a look at my old list, the list I had before the March balance update. Here is that Shield Host list, and I did name it Ride the Lightning. Before the update, it was 2,000 points. Our Warlord was a Blade Champion with the Auric Mantle Enhancement, and another Blade Champion with the Panoptic Spec Enhancement. Both Blade Champions went up by 10 points in this balance update. For our other datasheets, I had 2 groups of 5 Wardens with the Guardian Spears and the Vexilla. They were 250 points for each of those 5-man units. They've gone up by 10 points per unit, bringing that total for those 5 units up to 520 now, instead of 500. I had 2 groups of Allarus Terminators, one with Guardian Spears and one with the Castellan Axes. I know the Guardian Spears are generally better. I just wanted to play around with these Castellan Axes. The +1 AP we can get from the Shield Host Detachment does help us use those Castellan Axes a little bit better, bringing them up to AP2, which makes them great for killing elite infantry. I did have 2 units of 3 Venatari with the Venatari Spears, 3 units of 2 Vertus Praetors. They all had salvo launchers. You could put Hurricane Bolters in here as well. I've just been playing around with these salvo launchers, a unit of Prosecutors, and a unit of Witch Seekers. This was 2,000 points before the balance update. Currently, we could not use this list since it is 2,040 points now. Here is that Shield Host Ride the Lightning list after the March 2025 balance update. Everything is the same from the Bladechampion Warlords to the Wardens in the Allarus. The only thing I've changed is I've actually dropped the Witch Seekers for 5 Prosecutors. I could have kept the Witch Seekers and dropped the Prosecutors, but with only 1 unit of Sisters now in this list, they're just going to be standing on the home objective, and I figured 5 bodies to spread out and screen would be better than the 4 Witch Seekers. The Witch Seekers do have that little bit of Overwatch threat, but overall I just wanted a bigger unit to screen my back lines. A change I am thinking about in this list is dropping one of these Venatari and that Panoptic Specs Enhancement to bring a unit of 4 Custodian Guard. That way I have a unit to sticky objectives throughout the game. This way I still have 1 unit of Venatari for a rapid ingress threat, and my Allarus Terminators in there as well. We'll touch on a few of the important stratagems and rules for this list from the Shield Host Detachment, and for this video I wanted to talk a little bit about my mindset and my reasons why I took these units in my Shield Host list. We do have the Army Rule Martial Kata, so in the fight phase we can either pick sustained hits or the lethal hits, as long as that model has the Martial Kata ability, and this is great for a low model melee army. Our Shield Host Detachment rule, Martial Mastery, at the start of the battle round, you can select one of the bullet points below, and if you do so, you have that ability until the start of the next battle round. So we could either have models with the Martial Kata ability have critical hits on 5s, or we could have melee weapons have +1 AP. If you're playing against something that doesn't have a lot of invulnerable save, +1 AP is the way to go. If going up to AP3 on our Guardian Spears isn't really going to make a difference with the invulnerable saves in the army we're facing, just take critical hits on 5s. There are 3 stratagems I want to touch on. Multi-potentiality for 1 CP, and this gives us a fallback, shoot, and charge. Very potent for a strong melee army. Arcane Genetic Alchemy for 1 CP. Any phase just after mortal wounds have been allocated to the Custodes model, and this is great because we can use this as a reactive stratagem when we've taken a bunch of mortal wounds. Pop the stratagem, it gives us a 4+ funeral pain against mortal wounds. GW has put in a FAQ that this does work on start of the phase abilities like Doombolt. Then we have Archaeotech Munitions for 1 CP. This is not going to come up a lot in this army since I don't have a lot of high output shooting, but this still can help when we do really need to put some range damage into something. For 1 CP, your unit will have lethal hits or the sustained hits on 1 ability. And this is not unit locked, so we can use it on the Vertus Praetors in this list. those are the stratagems that we're going to be using a lot in this list. Any of the other ones we will mention as we go through the unit breakdown. Let's start the unit breakdown with our 2 units of Bladechampion and 5 Wardens. One of the Bladechampions has the Panoptic Spec enhancement for the unit to ignore cover with their ranged attacks. It would be better on some Custodian Guard or Allarus Terminators, but this still will give us a little bit of extra punch with the Warden's ranged attacks. The other Bladechampion has the Orc Mantle enhancement to give the Bladechampion 2 extra wounds, taking it to a total of 8 wounds. And these 2 units are going to be my primary units. I will start both on the board to put some pressure on the objectives as soon as possible. I like to set these up for a counter charge, using my other units to grab the objectives early, and then have these sitting in some good staging areas. The Wardens have that 2+ save with 4+ invulnerable and 3 wounds per model. Both of their abilities increase the survivability of the unit. A once per game 4+ feel no pain and -1 to the wound roll if the incoming attack strength is higher than the Warden's toughness 6. This is a unit that the stratagem on Wavering Sentinels will really shine. For 1 CP, I feel I have not been using this stratagem as much as I should have been. Now that I've played a few games where I've made sure to use this when I could, it makes a big difference when combined with all the other defensive buffs the Wardens bring. If you've not been using Unwavering Sentinels like me as much as you should be, try using it on your Wardens because it really makes a difference. The Detachment Rule Martial Mastery, that extra AP1 or crits on 5s, although Wardens in the new lines of the Emperor Detachment can hit quite hard too, I still think the Shield Host Detachment does add the most melee damage. They have that Guardian Spear profile with 5 attacks, hitting on 2+, strength 7, AP2, damage 2, but no reroll wounds on these Wardens. That extra AP1 or crits on 5s really helps out these Wardens. Also helps the Bladechampion, bringing his AP3 damage 3 weapon up to AP4. So that's 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 6, AP4, damage 3 with devastating wounds. Now that these have gone up by 10 points and the Custodian Guard by 10 points, I do want to play around with the Custodian Guard some and seeing maybe if dropping one of these Wardens units for some more Custodian Guard or for some other Custodian units. I'll have to test this list some more because this list was doing quite well before the balance update in my testing and in the games I was able to get before the balance update. Next up is our 2 units of 3 Allarus Terminators, and I'm really happy that these are going to be really good in the new lines of the Emperor Detachment. These are still really good in pretty much all the detachments since they have such a good data sheet. They're really great in the Shield Host Detachment as well. And these 2 units are going to be my attack and utility units. They have the Slayer of Tyrants ability to reroll wounds into character, vehicle, or monster units. And that's in your shooting phase or the fight phase, you get to reroll wounds. Pair that for the Martial Kata in the fight phase for sustained hits or lethal hits, and then Martial Mastery for crits on 5s or AP1 to their melee weapons. They become very deadly in this detachment. They also have Golden Light for a once per game return to reserves, and then we can bring them down in later turns with either rapid ingress if we need to, or just deep strike them down. This is a reposition move. That means we don't have to bring them down in turn 3 or they'll be destroyed. You can hold on to them till turn 5 if you really want to. You have to use Golden Light though. You can't start them in reserves and hold them in reserves until past turn 3. You have to place them down the board and then pick them up off the board with Golden Light. With 4 wounds each, it does take 2 damage 3 attacks to kill one, which is a big deal in these days of damage 3 weapons everywhere it seems. It seems everywhere is damage 3 and just picks off Custodian Guard and Custodian Wardens just with 1 shot. So those 4 wounds will make them more tanky into those damage 3 weapons. 3 Allarus in the Shield Host Detachment is enough to threaten most units in the game. I did take 1 unit with the 3 Castellan Axes. When we use +1 AP from the detachment rule on these axes, they go up to damage 3 with AP2. They become quite effective into those Terminator profiles or anything with the damage reduction abilities. And with damage, you round up, so when you half damage one of these damage 3 axes from a Catan or something like that, it goes from damage 3 to damage 2. Instead of like our Guardian Spears who go from damage 2 to damage 1, and that can be crippling into Deathwing Knights or targets like that, so these 3 axes will help me into those targets. And I have been using these to deep strike them down to give backup to my Wardens when they're being pressured. They are a fantastic addition to a counter charge after we've used the Wardens 4+ Feel No Pain. If my opponent had a lot of deep strike threat, I would use one of these to screen my back lines, and then after turn 3, when all that deep strike threat is gone, I use Golden Light to return them in reserves, and then use them for some late game scoring or some late game unit killing. You're not going to do this all the time. It's just when you have a lot of deep strike threat in the opponent's list. Next up is the Tricksy Venatari. We have 2 units of 3 in this list, and the swooping dive ability gives us a lot of options for this unit. A free rapid ingress is very strong, even more so when we can use it twice in the same turn. All lances in this unit to give both units 15 attacks with those Venatari lances. They will also have +1 to the wound roll when they charge, since they do have that lance ability on their weapons. Movement 10 inches with fly and being infantry makes these sneaky fast. They can rapid ingress further away if they need to stay out of line of sight, and then move those 10 inches to get within charge range. Our detachment rule can bring their lances up to AP3 or crits on 5s with sustained hits 1 or lethal hits from the army rule. Even just 3 of these in a unit are very deadly. It's also not a very CP hungry unit. They have free rapid ingress and free fallback shoot and charge built right into their datasheet. I like to set these up as a huge countercharge when needed along with the Allarus. With this list, we can drop down a huge amount of potential damage all around the board. The Venatari are very good at stealing objectives from the opponents, especially their home objective. With their 10-inch move, there's more opportunity to drop these out of line of sight and then still move them to get a good charge onto the opponent's home objective. Next is our 3 units of 2 Vertus Praetors. I only have 6 Vertus Praetors in my collection. That's not enough to run that Steven Box Shield Host list, and I know I need to get more Vertus Praetors, so I'll get on top of that. Although 3 units of 2 turned out to be much better than I thought they would be, even more as attack units. I have 7 units in this list that are under 200 points, while any of those units can kill well over 200 points of enemy models, and this gives me the option to trade with enemy units much easier than a big bricks of units list. And that's something a lot of our lists lack, as trading units, something you can just throw into a big tough unit, hopefully smash out that unit. You know you're going to lose that unit in return in the opponent's next turn, and that's something we really don't want to do with a big 300 to 400 point unit. So some of these smaller units do give me the option to trade into enemy units. The Shield Host rules allow these attack units to output a lot of damage in melee. And how I use these in my list is use their auto 6-inch advance turn 1 to get some board control and grab my expansion objective. A unit of 2 is much easier to hide out of line of sight from enemy guns. I find them a great option to charge into the enemy's opponent's first wave of attackers. They have the lance ability to give them +1 to the wound roll when they have charged. So I let my wardens stay safe in the staging areas, and then when the wardens do come out, my opponents have less tools to take them out with, because I use my Vertus Praetors to put some early game pressure on my opponent's units. They are also great for secondary scoring. I feel much better having a 150 point jet bike unit doing containment or sabotage over a big expensive wardens unit. Each model is toughness 7 with 5 wounds. This needs dedicated fire to stop from completing those secondary actions. Movement 12 inches with fly gives me good options for engage or behind enemy lines. The question is salvo launchers or hurricane bolters. I have had success and failure with both. I do like that combined with the salvo launchers and the charge, these 2-man units can threaten vehicle monster units. I think overall it would be harder to take out these vehicle and monster units with the hurricane bolters over these salvo launchers and then charge. I do have Allarus on my list, and they are pretty good for anti-infantry, so hopefully I can rely on them and use these salvo launchers on the Vertus Praetors. But like I've said, I've had success and failure with both the hurricane bolters and the salvo launchers on these bikes. Our final unit is the Prosecutors, a great cheap unit for doing secondary actions, but with only 1 Psychona unit in the list, we'll use this to stand on the home objective as long as there's no 6-inch deep strike threat or a big bunch of indirect fire threat. And it's a cheap unit, and it's a cheap 40 point unit to stand on our home objective. There's no real detachment support, but for currently 40 points for 4 models, they are our cheapest unit to stand on our home objective. And I did add 1 more model to screen. It was either drop the Prosecutors or the Witchseekers, and that would only leave me 1 Psychona unit. And I do need 1 to hold my home objective. That is the reason I went with 5 Prosecutors instead of the Witchseekers. The 5 Prosecutors can do a better job of screening. While the Witchseekers did have that little bit of overwatch threat for the home objective, I would rather that little bit more of a screening bubble. That's my mindset and the reason of why I took these units. I still am a little torn of maybe dropping one of these Venatari for some Custodian Guard, but I would like to test this list out a little bit more. And let's move on to a quick game plan. I will start the Allarus in the Venatari in reserves. Use rapid ingress to bring them in on later turns. The Venatari are scary good combined with rapid ingress. The Wardens and possibly one of my bike units will pressure and hold primary objectives. Lots of options to screen our back lines. Then after turn 3, when that deep strike threat is gone, we can start pushing up the board and really putting the pressure on. We have a lot of small units in this list. Movement is key. Other than the Wardens, our units cannot survive sustained attacks. Stay in cover and use line of sight terrain to our advantage. This list hits very hard when we're putting constant board and damage pressure on our opponent. I like to set up a big go turn with this list. It has the overall speed to make multiple charges in one turn, giving it the potential to table opponents. When we can make multiple charges per turn, we just start blending through units. I didn't forget about those players who still wanted to use Grav-tanks, so here is the Grav-tank version of my Ride the Lightning list. This one does come to 2,000 points. Our Warlord is going to be Valerian this time instead of 2 Blade Champions, so we'll have Valerian as our Warlord, and a Blade Champion without any enhancement as our second character. We will still have 2 units of 5 Wardens with the Spears and the Vexilla, 1 to join Valerian and 1 to join the Blade Champion. We have 2 Cladius Grav-tanks with the Twin Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon, 2 3-man units of Venatari with the Venatari Spears, 3 units of 2 Vertus Praetors with the Hurricane Bolters this time, finally a unit of Prosecutors to stand on the home objective. This list will still have a fair amount of speed, not quite as fast as the Infantry Ride the Lightning list, but we still have Venatari and Vertus Praetors and Advance and Charge Blade Champion. This way we do have some anti-tank in the list while still having a deadly melee threat throughout the list. So that's my Grav-tank Ride the Lightning version. Now let's finish the video with some final thoughts. And even though I do have multiple small units in this list, they all hit very hard in melee. And we did take some nerfs on that balance update, but overall, I only really had to drop 1 unit of Sisters. It could have been a lot worse than that. I think Talons of the Emperor and Shield Host got off quite easy. The Solar Spearhead was hit a bit harder. The Wardens in this list can push objectives, while the rest of the list can score or take out the opponent's scoring units and army. Just 2 of these bikes can engage a 10-man infantry unit. It may not take that unit out, but it should cripple that unit. While the Allarus and the Venatari in the list will pick up that 10-man unit altogether, as well as threaten vehicle monster units and elite infantry. If you have any thoughts on this list, throw it down below. I do want to play around with the Custodian Guard in this detachment rule. I still may switch the salvo launchers to Hurricane Bolters. I want to play this a little bit more in the new balance update, just to see how I'm going to go with those Vertus Praetors. If you liked the video, subscribe for weekly battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content. Like always, thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by.